Hello, everyone. A very good sunny afternoon to you. Thank you for having me today, Jack. I am Ritika, a neuroscience PhD student at Oxford, and today I will tell you a little bit about the fascinating ways in which different animals rest. And when I say rest, I mean sleep and hibernate. Um, so, a little about me before we begin. I grew up in India, where I went to school and studied physics, chemistry, and biology in high school. This is when I learned how important sleep was to me. I would know because I actually dropped math, the subject that made me lose sleep. Something is wrong. Here we go. Now that looks more like me. And then I went to college. I had no idea what I wanted to do, just knew that I liked animals. And so I did an undergraduate degree in zoology or animal biology with a side of chemistry. Most of my undergrad was spent in a pandemic, during which I worked online with a group based in California, so across the world. And we studied how seals slept in the open ocean. And this actually sealed my interest in sleep. And I flew in here to Oxford to understand the neuroscience and physiology of how animals rest, recover, and rejuvenate. Then I did my master's in neuroscience, again, working with different kinds of animals like ferrets, mice, hamsters, and then stayed to do a DPhil or PhD looking at sleep and hibernation in these very cute animals called Siberian hamsters. These guys. I've divided my talk into three small parts. First, let's talk about why studying sleep is interesting at all, and then we'll go forward. Now, just think about it. What does sleep mean to you? It is like a fundamental state of being, just like breathing, eating, reproducing, maybe for you guys, walking around, playing. It's just as important as everything else. But when you're asleep, you're less alert, you're inactive, and if you're an animal living in the wild, you are vulnerable to predation. When you're asleep, any other animal can basically come and eat you up. So, this is not really ideal for survival if you think of a jungle. And yet, sleep is so common and so essential. How do you feel when you're unable to get enough sleep? You probably feel really drowsy and really tired and unable to think. Well, these are a few things that about sleep that I think. So if someone asks me what kinds of hobbies do you have, I can very easily say sleeping a hobby because I sleep a lot. Um, there is a lot of variability in humans on when and how much each person needs to sleep. Now, all of us on average spend one third of our whole life sleeping. So, for example, if you're a human living for around 75 to 80 years, you spend 25 years of your life just sleeping. Typically, adolescents, teenagers, people in your age group, they need more sleep and they tend to feel sleepy later in the evening. However, even this can be different for different humans because different people have different chronotypes. Some people are night owls, so they prefer to stay up late. Some are morning larks and they wake up early and they like to work in the early hours. If you're a student, a graduate student like me, though, you probably will be a permanently exhausted pigeon like that. That's just a joke. I'm all good. Sleeping is really important for many things, but mainly in the context of being in school, it's important for learning. Sleeping before learning and also after learning something new is very important. For example, consider your brain like a sponge. If a sponge already holds too much water, it cannot take any more of it. So, sleep is something that rids the sponge of old water, allowing for new water or new memories to come in, for new learning to happen. But once you have learned something, you also need good sleep after that so that you can perform proper memory consolidation, which basically means that you delete irrelevant memories and remember relevant things. So you do some space management in the big files and folders of your brain's memory system. For example, in this picture, you can see how sleep and learning work together. In the left picture, you see the orange blobs are much more prominent. There are more orange blobs than in the right picture. This means that there is more blood flowing to the brain. So in both these pictures, you see slices of a human brain, and in that, in the left one, there's more activity, meaning more blood flow. In the right one, there is less activity, and this has been done. This picture has been taken while a human was performing a cognitive test. So some sort of an activity which involved a lot of brain use. So the left one was taken after they slept, and the right one was taken when they had not slept well. So you can see that only after they had slept could they perform well enough, or the blood could go to the brain and use the brain regions properly that are required for the task that they were asked to do. Um, and this whole technique of looking at which how much blood is going to which area of the brain is known as fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. Um, so sleep not just affects learning, memory, but everything like performance, overall metabolism, appetite, how hungry you feel, and your immune function, that is your body's ability to fight diseases. So short sleep, when you sleep less, it is associated with high levels of a chemical in your body called ghrelin, and ghrelin makes you feel more hungry, and lower levels of leptin, which makes you feel satisfied. So if there is high ghrelin, low leptin, you feel more hungry, you eat more, and so it also is related to obesity. Poor sleep results in poor response to pathogens, which means that if you don't sleep well when you're sick, then it'll take you much longer to recover from that sickness, from that illness. And it has been seen that nearly 20% of car crashes, or situations where the car nearly crashed but did not ultimately lead to a catastrophic situation, in 20% of such cases, it was because of drivers being fatigued and sleepless. So, bottom line, sleep is super important for everything. Um, So, broadly speaking, sleep has a few different stages. There is rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, and non rapid eye movement sleep, or non REM sleep. And the way we can see which stage of sleep a human or an animal is in is by looking at the waves or the patterns inside the brain, or brain activity, called through a technique called electroencephalography. Electro relating to electrical activity, encephalo relating to the brain or the head, and graphy relates to any kind of measurement. And if you abbreviate it, it's called EEG. Now, EEG waves, or brain activity waves, in non rapid eye movement sleep are really tall and fat. It means that all the different cells in the brain are experiencing periods of silence. They are turning on and turning off at the same time. But the EEG waves in the dream state of rapid eye movement sleep are very similar to that when you are awake. When you are awake or when you are dreaming, your brain waves, or EEG waves, as you see here, over here, they are very similar looking. They are all really small and compact. And this means that all the different nerve cells in your brain are activated or firing in a desynchronized manner. So there's much more activity going on in your brain. And this could be a way to maybe explain how vivid and lifelike dreams sometimes seem. So, despite sleep appearing to be a state of inactivity, there is actually a lot of activity inside the brain and body while animals sleep. While asleep, as you remember, sleep makes you more vulnerable to predation, and yet it is universal and essential. And so, all animals studied so far have some semblance to this kind of staged sleep. But How long and in what way different species sleep also shows great variation. And the variation in the ways in which different animals have adapted to sleeping in different environments is so diverse that it makes us question what exactly is the function of. So I'm sorry, guys. There's some sort of a technical snag with the video thing. It usually always plays, but for now, I'm going to explain what it would look like. And in the end, if we've got time, I'll try to play the videos. So this is a common neighborhood dog. And if this video would play, you could actually see its eyes moving back and forth, darting from right to left in a to and fro motion while it was experiencing rapid eye movement or REM sleep. Sometimes, when dogs are in REM sleep or in the dream sleep, they also move their paws. If you have any pets at home, you can observe this happening in them. And maybe they're dreaming of running after rabbits or cats, pawing at them, who knows? But the thing that saves us and our dogs from acting out our dreams is the fact that during REM sleep, most of our muscles are actually paralyzed. But there are some disorders, for example, in humans, there's one called REM sleep behavior disorder, where there is no muscle paralysis during REM sleep. And so sometimes humans act out really violent dreams and start vocalizing or vocalizing, meaning they start to talk in their dreams. And because we understand these disorders and the basis of them now, we are able to treat them. Okay. Here, this is another cool example of REM sleep. So, when octopuses or octopi are in the dream state or REM sleep state, they actually start changing their colors. Sometimes they are this way, they are beige or yellowish, but sometimes they turn totally red. Sometimes they turn blue. It totally depends on what they are thinking of, what is going on in their brains. And this is cool because animals like octopi have decentralized brains. They don't have any one organ inside the brain box. The parts of their nervous system that compose the whole brain are divided into all their tentacles, into their different arms and legs. And so when you see a change in the nerve activity or neural activity during REM sleep, it reflects in the full brain through in the full body through changes in the skin color. Also, there is also this really more exotic species called the parrotfish, which lives in the reefs in the oceans. And what happens in these fascinating fish is that when they start going to sleep, they think that, okay, before I go to sleep, I'm going to make sure that I am protected from all the different tiny parasites that could come and feed on me when I'm not awake. And so, to do that protective function, they actually through their mouths make a bubble of mucus that surrounds themselves. And that bubble of mucus keeps any insects or parasites that could come and feed on their skin away. So, this does two things. One is protection from any kinds of pathogens. And second, if there is a disturbance to the mucus bubble around its head, around its body, that could indicate the presence of a predator like an eel that eat these fish. So this also assists in vigilance and protection both during sleep. So this is a really cool example of an adaptive response to sleeping in a very adverse and in a very hard to survive environment like a deep ocean that is teeming with all kinds of animals. Now, aquatic mammals like seals, for example, are another example of how to sleep while you're at sea. So, fish have gills, which allows them to breathe inside the water, but animals like seals, dolphins, whales, they don't have gills. They have lungs like us, like humans. And they have to breathe through their noses to take the air into their lungs to be able to oxygenate their blood and to be able to transfer all the nutrients and all the oxygen to the different parts of the body and survive. So, this means that they have to always be able to swim to come to the surface of the water and breathe. But coming to the surface of the water is actually a very risky thing when you are asleep. It all because it means that sharks and all the animals that eat you can actually come see you very easily and gobble you up while you're asleep. So how do these animals, these northern fur seals for example, survive as well as sleep while they are at sea? They do this through a very cool phenomenon called unihemispheric sleep. What happens is that they sleep with one half of their brain, but the other half is awake. So, for example, if the right half of the brain is awake, the left half sleeps at the same time, and in some time they swap. So, the left half stays awake and the right side sleeps. And the way both all kinds of mammals are wired in terms of their nervous system is that if it is the right part of your brain that controls the left half of your body and the left part of your brain controls the right half of your body. So if the right part of the brain is awake, then the left flipper or the left limb and the left eye are also awake. So if the left eye is open, then it is inside the water. So while sleeping, the fur seal can actually see if there is any kind of a predator or a shark or an orca whale coming to get it. The left flipper keeps moving, which means that it can still keep flapping its flippers and stay afloat on the surface of the water, keeping its nostrils outside and breathing. And simultaneously, the right eye and the right flipper are resting. And then they alternate. So this was a video demonstrating that. If none of these work and if we don't have time in the end, then I'll make sure I send everyone a list of all these videos so that if not now, later at home in your leisure time, you can watch it. And these are all available on YouTube. Um, So, this phenomenon of unihemispheric sleep, or one half of the brain sleeping at a time while the other is awake, is actually not unique to seals in water. Even other kinds of animals, like crocodiles, who survive in very hot conditions, as well as birds who have to make sure that they remain somewhat vigilant while they sleep, or that have to travel long distances to migrate. These kinds of animals also have unihemispheric sleep. For example, there is a bird called the great frigate bird, which flies for many weeks when it has to migrate. So, and when it flies, it has to fly over water, and it's not really an aquatic bird, so it doesn't land on the water to rest or anything. It has to keep flying all throughout. So, how does it sleep when it's flying? It sleeps with half a brain at a time, and that's how it keeps the wings open as well, like while simultaneously catching up on some sleep. But what is interesting is that some other seals, like northern elephant seals, that live under the same kinds of environmental pressures, they cannot sleep with one half of the brain at a time. They have to sleep bihemispherically, like humans, that is, sleep with both halves of the brain at the same time and wake at the same time. So then how do they survive at sea? How do they make sure that they are able to breathe? What they do is they hold their breath for a very long time and they sleep at depths in the ocean where they know that there are no predators. So this allows them to, one, not in like inhale a lot of water and fill their lungs with water. So they breathe a lot at the surface and then they hold their breath for nearly 20 to 70 minutes in what is called apnea. Holding breath is technically called apnea. And then they fall asleep, spiraling downwards as they sleep to depths where there are no predators. And then once they've had a bit of a nap, they again swim to the surface of the water, breathe, and then hold their breath and spiral down. So, the way we study all of this in our labs or in the wild conditions is through two techniques. One is electrophysiology, which involves EEG, like I said before, catching the brain waves, as well as other things like electromyography, where you measure the muscle activity. But in a lab condition where the animals that you are recording the signals, brain waves, muscle activity from, it is easy to do that by recording it through a cable, just like any other normal electronic cable that you maybe use to charge your phone, whatever. But when you do this in wild conditions, for example, in these seals, as you can see here, this study was done by putting electrophysiology sensors on the body of the animal, just sticking them on, and then the seal went into the ocean and lived its own life. But we were still able to catch its brain waves, its muscle activity, and that was possible through a technology called telemetry. Telemetry involves the same kinds of techniques or the same kinds of technology that is involved in Bluetooth technology that you have in your phones or Wi-Fi technology that we are all using right now. So putting a lot of different things together, this kind of experiments or this kind of study, these kinds of studies are possible. So despite so much variety in how animals sleep, there are still some common features across the animal kingdom. However, these features also coincide with other states of dormancy like hibernation. All of this physical quiescence, being inactive, assuming a typical posture, like curling up, or being less responsive to external happenings. All of these things also happen when animals hibernate. So, is there anything beyond sleep? Is hibernation something that happens beyond sleep? Are sleep and hibernation the same thing? That's what we'll look at next. Now, several animals like squirrels, like hummingbirds, bears, even mice and hamsters, once they fall asleep, they can transition into other kinds of vigilant states where there are a lot of different things happen in their body. It's absolutely different. One such physiological state or bodily state that comes after sleep, once you fall asleep, you switch, which is of special interest to many sleep scientists like me, is called torpor. Torpor. Torpor is a big umbrella term under which many animals like hibernating bears, ground squirrels, birds, even freezing fish, frogs, insects, hummingbirds all come in. Broadly speaking, it refers to this collection of energy conservation strategies. So, although a torpid animal may appear to be asleep, as you can see maybe in these pictures, due to its posture, it may appear to be asleep. Torpor is still not the same as sleep. In fact, during torpor, animals are deprived of sleep and they have to come out of torpor or hibernation to be able to catch up on all the time they spend not sleeping. So, like I said, since it is a way to conserve energy, something that is common to all of these kinds of torpor is that there is a reduction in the amount of energy spent in a given period of time. So, this is called hypometabolism, and animals experience low body temperatures, and this is called hypothermia. The most popular phenomenon under this is hibernation or deep torpor. That's like a seasonal and very long duration, sometimes even 3 month long, significant decrease in body temperature, as is seen by bears in the winter. Another kind is shallow daily torpor, where the depth and the duration of the hypothermia, that is low body temperature, and hypometabolism, that is less energy expenditure, that the duration and the depth of these is not that long. It's kind of shallow. And this is more common and it is seen in hamsters, in dormice, in even some kinds of birds like hummingbirds and frog mouths. Even hedgehogs, our friendly neighborhood hedgehogs, experience this in the winter. Sometimes this kind of phenomenon is seen in response to hot and dry environments as opposed to um, cold environments like for the bears and the hummingbirds and the hedgehogs and the hamsters. If this happens in response to hot and dry environments, it is called estivation, and that is a feature of some reptiles and amphibians. Now, out of all of these, I work on shallow daily torpor, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So, hummingbirds are an example of birds that go into torpor. Now, during torpor, their body temperature can lower to around 3 degrees Celsius. 3 degrees Celsius is super cold, super cold. Some of the coldest winter days in the UK are around 3 degrees Celsius. And with a heart rate of around 50 beats per minute as opposed to the usual 1200 beats per minute. So usually their heart beats 1200 times, 1200 times in 1 minute, but when they are in torpor, it beats only 50 times, and that's really, really low. Sometimes what happens is that they can be found in people's gardens just hanging upside down, like in this video, in this picture, sorry, and they're immobile. And so people think that they are dead and they put them in the garbage. But actually, they are not dead, they're totally alive, they're just in torpor, and they have to do that. Just a side note though, hummingbirds are not found in the UK. They are mostly found in the United States. So if you ever happen to visit in the winter, you might actually come across some. Um, this was a video that shows how kind of technique called thermal imaging is used to show how hot or how cold an animal is. So, how thermal imaging works is that um, there are many different kinds of radiations that are there all around us. One kind of radiation that happens as a result of heat is called infrared radiation. And there are some special cameras, just like your phone camera, but with an extra feature that can, instead of looking at just normal visible radiation that allows us to see, it can also capture this infrared radiation. And these cameras are called thermal imaging cameras. So, this is what a thermal imaging camera view looks like. Um, the bits that are orangish red, those are the hot parts of the bird. See, this is the beak, that's the head, that's the body, and the tail is somewhere here. And the parts that are bluish and more in cool colors, those are the colder parts of the bird. And when this video plays, you can see that over time, the bird becomes so cold that you cannot even see it because the temperature of the room the bird is in, as well as the bird, becomes just the same. And it totally vanishes to the view of the thermal camera, thus going really cold. In my PhD research, I work with a torpor expressing species called Siberian hamsters that are actually native to high altitude Siberian wheat fields. Now, looking more specifically at these hamsters, they are nocturnal, meaning that they stay awake at night. They are solitary, so they don't really have a lot of friends they hang out with. They like to live alone and they make burrows in nature. And where they come from, they experience two very drastic seasons broadly. One is summer, when, like we are experiencing now, there is a lot of sunlight for a long duration, and then there is a very short period of darkness. So for them, they get around 18 hours of light exposure in a day, and the rest of it is dark. At that time, they appear really dark and blackish brown in color. They eat a lot, so they are really fat. They can reproduce and they are euthermic, which means that they maintain normal body temperatures of around 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. But as the seasons progress, the days get shorter, the temperature gets colder, so their fur color starts changing. From being dark and black, they actually become totally white. And with that, they also stop eating that much. So their body weight decreases, food intake decreases, and ultimately they're also incapable of reproduction. At this stage, at some point, when they start falling asleep, they also decide to enter these periods of torpor where their body temperature drops, their metabolic rate or energy expenditure drops for durations between 30 minutes to even 6 hours. And in the lab, the way we recreate these seasonal conditions is by keeping hamsters either in 16 hours of light, 8 hours of dark exposure, or moving them to a room where they get just the opposite, just 8 hours of light and 16 hours of dark. So this is the summer room and this is the winter room. And if you keep a hamster in the winter room for around 12 weeks, then you will see that it would have turned white, it would start going into torpor. Again, using the techniques of thermal imaging and electrophysiology, we are able to study this and see how torpor and sleep are related. So, it was found using these two techniques that in mice and in hamsters, that in the right conditions they fall asleep, and at one point when they are in non-rapid eye movement sleep, if you remember, that was the time when the brain cells were turning on and turning off at the same time, they start entering torpor, and in that state they experience a metabolic suppression where the amount of energy they spend can go down to nearly 95%. So there is a 95% reduction in how much energy they spend than they would normally. And in terms of brain activity during torpor, the EEG waves or the brain waves are fat, like the ones seen in non rapid eye movement sleep, but they're not as tall. And if you say this in technical terms, the frequency or the distribution of the waves is similar in non-rapid eye movement sleep and torpor, but the amplitude or the height of the waves is not that much. And this is also similar to what you see when you put an animal or a human under anesthesia. And like I said, once the animal comes out of torpor, and you can see that through this blue trace over here, this blue trace shows the body temperature. During torpor, indicated by this TOR, the body temperature decreases. But when it recovers and the animal comes out of torpor, it sleeps a lot more. And that is what this green mountain sort of shows. So, a lot of cool things happen during torpor in hamsters, and all of these abilities seem to be highly conserved in evolution. Some studies that look at which part of an animal's DNA are working, DNA referring to the genetic material or the machinery that is inside our bodies that allows different things to happen. So the DNA or the machinery that is required during torpor is also found in humans, and yet it seems that humans cannot perform these extraordinary feats of low body temperature, um, low metabolic rate normally. Because if we were to look at these same symptoms or these same features in a human body, it would be in a human suffering from a stroke. A stroke happens when there is less blood flowing to the brain or less blood flowing to the heart from the heart or to the other organs, and that results in organ failure that may actually lead to death. But it seems that when hamsters have those hypometabolic or hypothermic states, they are totally fine. So, for example, sometimes in the process of childbirth, there is a situation where there is a lack of oxygen going to the brain, and this is called hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. It's a disease which damages the brains of infants and may even lead to lifelong neurological or developmental problems. The state of the human body in this condition, or even when a human is suffering from like cardiac arrest, is very similar to that when hamsters are in torpor or emerging out of torpor. So, if we can understand the biological basis of this, we can help to provide neurocritical care in these situations, in these diseases. And there is another reason why it is important to consider things like controlled human torpor, and that is for long duration space flight, which means that sometimes, nowadays at least, humans are trying to go to Mars, for example. But the problem with going to Mars one of the problems with going to Mars is that you need a lot of resources to sustain humans during that long duration space flight. You need to supply air, supply oxygen, water, food, all of that to keep a human alive and running. But that means that a rocket or a spacecraft has to carry all of that material, and that can be really heavy and really hard to preserve because without a fridge, you can't really keep a lot of food for a very long time. So, if you cannot supply a lot of resources, then another way to look at it would be to reduce the amount of resources required. And that could be done by trying to send humans in torpor or put them in a sort of hypometabolic or hypothermic state where the requirements of the body are reduced. And so that is why the European Space Agency or NASA are actually investing in research on developing hypometabolism habitats or these kinds of pods or tiny rooms for humans so that they can stay there, survive there for long duration space flights, maybe to go to Mars. So humans can sleep. Humans have the machinery that we think is required for going into hibernation, going into torpor. And we saw that sleep and torpor are linked. Animals enter torpor through non rapid eye movement sleep and have a drop in body temperature. Humans also have a drop in body temperature through during non-rapid eye movement sleep, but they can't enter torpor. But if we figure out what that switch from non-rapid eye movement sleep to torpor is and how it works, maybe humans could also one day go into torpor, and that is what I try to look at. So that was the end of my talk, and this is just a summary of the key takeaways. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katika. I think that was really interesting. I'm especially interested in the space travel from a biological point of view. It's quite an interesting overlap, I think. Do you want to, because we have a bit of time, are you happy trying to get those videos?
Yeah, so very good question. Yes, the color actually does change back when the hamsters um, go back into summer or spring again. And it can happen as many times as you put them through the seasonal cycle. I can try to, so I found a few of the videos and I'm just going to show it to you on YouTube. And this is one of the first ones, the one from the octopus, which I really like. So you don't really need the sound. I'm going to turn it off. But this was actually seen at an aquarium. And yeah, so this is the octopus changing its color while it keeps streaming. And you can also see the different patterns on its body. It's pretty cool. And you know, you can also look up videos for jellyfish, and for the jellyfish, they keep pulsating. So that's a very dramatic change. But for the jellyfish, they don't change color, but they have different patterns of pulsating and moving, basically, their arms when they are dreaming and sleeping. So, yeah, that was the dreaming octopus. Then we have the parrotfish that makes the mucus bubble when it sleeps. So that's it. So I'm just going to let you read the text because it's really nice, explains things really well. Hmm.
Aratika, sorry, I don't know what happened there. My laptop just decided to kick me out. That's okay.
No problem. I've been just showing some of the videos, and this is the hummingbird. So this is when it's hot and breathing a lot and warm and orange. But then see, slowly it turns totally white, totally blue, merging with the background, and you can see that it's not really breathing that hard, not really breathing that fast. So it has a very low heart rate. That's what a bird in torpor looks like. So yeah, those were the main videos. Do we have any more questions? Are there many careers in the study of sleep? Totally. So, um, very good question, Simi. There are, as you can see, there's a lot of variation in how different animals sleep. So, one kind of a career in this would be to study how the physiology of sleep changes in different kinds of conditions, ecological, environmental conditions. So, for example, um, the climate change is a big issue right now. The habitats of different animals are basically deteriorating, decimated. Um, the places where they sleep are therefore also highly disturbed. If an animal cannot sleep well, it will most likely die very soon. So, that is one area of research, one career area where preserving sleeping habitats for ecology as well as physiology can be done. Then another more direct and obvious one is to study sleep in humans, because there are a lot of sleep disorders that plague all kinds of humans, different age groups, different areas of the world. So studying sleep in them, seeing how it works generally, seeing how what the neurobiology or how the brain and the body work in different kinds of sleep diseases, in a clinical setting, for example, can also be one career. Path. And in these two different career paths, there are many smaller veins depending on what kinds of a condition you choose to study, what animal you choose to study. And then there is also things like torpor or hibernation, like what I work on, where you can see how sleep is related to other states of being, other consciousness states. What's the difference between hibernation and brumation? That's a very good question. So, brumation is somewhat similar to estivation. You remember I showed a slide or a small box about how reptiles and amphibians, they go into hypometabolic states or hypothermic states in response to hot and dry arid conditions. That is kind of similar to brumation. When snakes do this, it is called brumation in particular. And hibernation is that hypometabolic response, mostly in um, response to really cold conditions. So while the way the animal responds is similar, the trigger or the cue that elicits that response is different in both these cases. What can I do to find out more about this subject? One is, so if you Google torpor and hibernation, you'll find a bunch of really interesting articles on the National Geographic website, which are really informative and fun to read. Um, I also have a list of really nice and easy to understand articles about this that I'm not sure, but if you would like that and if that's possible to reach to you, I can send that over. And it's got also the links to all of these videos. And going ahead, if you are interested in studying science, biology, even physics, anything to do with this kind of a discipline, you will come across many research papers and articles that talk about how this works on a more granular scale, how each neuron talks to the other when in a state like this. So, yeah, the National Geographic articles are really good to start with, I think. Um, Great.
Anyone has any more questions, please type them in the chat. I think we'll give it a second just in case anyone has any more that they want to ask.
Great. So this is the one. Sorry, there's an ad.
That's the
Um,
downside of YouTube, I guess.
yeah. So this is and sleep in a dog, and I see how the ears are twitching and the eyes are moving right and left. That is where the name REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep comes from, really. Even humans in this state of sleep have their eyes moving under the closed eyelids. We still don't know why this happens. No idea why the eyes dart back and forth under closed eyelids. In animals like cats and dogs, they don't really have to shut their eyes completely in order to sleep. They have what is known as a third eyelid, which is like a small membrane which comes from around here, like from the place where the tears come, and that is actually put over the eye so they don't have to shut the eyelid completely to keep their eyes moist and safe while they're sleeping. So if you see this in your cats or dogs, then you would know what exactly is happening. Yep,
We have
those
one
were
more
it.
question about whether you think space travel is possible using torpor.
I think it is possible because nowadays people have been using controlled hypothermia, that is, controlling the low body temperatures that you can put a human in for things like cardiac surgery, for example. And it works. It may not be very widely used or widely accepted yet, but we know much more about it, and it's beginning to make sense to humans. So, if we keep researching this, if we keep trying to understand it through different kinds of ways, different kinds of approaches, I think one day, maybe in the next 50 to 60 years, perhaps, it might be possible with Torpor to go to space. But it's going to take some time because, like you saw, there are a lot of things working differently in a hibernating or a torpid animal. And to recreate all of that in a human, we have to really be careful that we can control all the things that could go wrong or right. If using torpor, how long can mental inactivity last? Again, there are a lot of different ways to answer that. But my first thought to this question would be, is it really mental inactivity? We don't know that. Nobody has looked at what kind of brain activity happens during torpor that well. There are some parts of the brain that are still working, that are still active, maybe to a lesser extent, but they're still working, still active, even during torpor. And that's why you're alive during torpor. But what is the reason why those states are active or inactive is what we need to understand first to be able to determine how long it can last that way. Um, for example, in the case of the hamsters, it can last up to 6 hours, up to 8 hours sometimes, and still it seems that they don't forget things they had learned before going into torpor. We still need to research this more, but sometimes people have done studies where they give the hamsters a task where they have to remember something. For example, their food is hidden and the hamsters have to find it before they go into torpor. And once they come out of torpor, the scientists test, do the hamsters still remember where the food was hidden? And it seems that they can remember where it was hidden. And this is not just in hamsters, but some other species like squirrels have also been tested using these kinds of memory tasks before and after torpor. So clearly, it wasn't totally mental inactivity, but yes, lowered activity. But it was regulated, it was controlled, and how that control or regulation came to be is what we are trying to figure out right now. So in humans, maybe it won't be as long as in the smaller animals because there's so many more requirements that humans have, but I may be totally wrong. Maybe human bodies are more self-sufficient than hamster bodies or squirrel bodies or bear bodies. Don't know. But if you look at bears, which are much bigger than humans, they can be in hibernation for up to 3 months. But in them, there seems to be some sort of a loss of mental capacity immediately after they come out of torpor. But still, It's not debilitating. They still survive after torpor, after hibernation. So it really depends on the species, on how it works, figuring it out before we can give a very certain answer to that question.
Brilliant, thank you, Ritika. I think that's all the questions. I feel like there's been lots of time there for any more that they had. So I think we'll end everything there. So thank you so much. Like I said, I was really interested in listening. And thank you to all your questions. Apologies that I disappeared for a second, but it seems to be fine. Everyone's still here, and it's all gone very well. Your next session will be next week, and it's going to be philosophy. So once again, we're completely off into a different subject. But I hope you're enjoying these. I hope you've enjoyed this today. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you again, Ritika, and take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.